Hello and welcome to the Digital Digest, your weekly breakfast of insights, tips and tricks and general information that will help anyone trying to move things forward in this digital world of accounting. This show is sponsored by Approval Max, the digital approval tool that will connect into your finance ledger now with both Capture and Pay. It's also brought to you both by the Digital Disruptors and SB Digital, which are pushing the boundaries in this digital accountancy space. I'm your host, Ryan Piercy, and this episode is diving into the case studies, the specific examples of those that are in this digital transformation space, helping clients with their, evolution of tech. And we're joined by Jamie Allen from 4.0 today. You may, if you've listened to or watched some of these before, you've probably heard him talk. He's a big fish in this space. So he's probably got lots of case studies, but I'm going to ask him to dive into one. So thank you, Jamie, for jumping in today and talking to me. I guess what if you pick one? What is a good business? What was their problem when they came and started talking to you?
Yeah, so this particular business is a not-for-profit, it's a trade union, fairly sizable business, turnover of north of 10 million, and is as a trade union, it's effectively a membership business. So in some ways, it's actually quite retail. It's called a trade union. It does represent its members, but really, it's a SaaS subscription business to, as well as supplying legal advice to their members and things like this. They obviously do ancillary trade union services, but in terms of how they generate their revenue, it's effectively a subscription business. So, covering a few different angles because it has the charity aspects, which has all the bits that go with being a charity in terms of reporting on funds, and there is some donations made, and it's also linked to the NHS, so there's some reporting requirements as a result of that, but also, more technical integration needs from maintaining a SaaS subscription business. So quite a few moving parts involved in it, from the membership and the collection of the cash and the reconciliation of that versus the general reporting requirements needed for a not-for-profit. So,
and I guess you've got all those control requirements as well. Those ones where they want to. Well, traditionally, it'd be lots of ticks and checks as a transaction will go through. But I guess my question to you at this point was, what made them reach out to you? Did they come to you with like a very specific problem and go, like, we've just got this thing, help, or is it like we're just in a mess, like, please help us on this?
No, well, it was a few things. So it's quite different from a normal client, because our normal client comes to us and asks us to make to give them the advice on what software they should go for or what's the best fit. This was actually referred to us by a software provider who had already sold the solution effectively. So the software provider came to us and said, we've got this client, they've actually got some concerns from a technical perspective in terms of being able to put in our solution, because it was a mid-market solution, so it had a few it wasn't a small project, right? And they had some more human, like, resource, time, effort, technical ability to deliver the project concerns. So that was our initial remit, was to go in there and almost go into the business and support them through the implementation of this mid-market application. Okay. What actually this evolved into was us delivering all of the data migration, all of the project, all of the training, and actually still ongoing services, because what tends to happen with these projects is you don't cover everything in the first iteration of the project. There's a number of things that they come with a wish list and say, we want to achieve this and this, and they believe that it's actually going to end up being your problem. And actually what we find is that the data doesn't add up and it's their problem. So there's always ongoing challenges that come out of these things, because it's very rare that everything works the first time. Right.
Okay. So how big was this trade union? Because it sounds like mid-tier solution. It must be a reasonable size.
Yeah, I think I've forgotten the last count, but they have tens of thousands of members. So it's a UK wide organization. So they have branches all over the UK, which will represent the members in their area. All right. But its main office is based in central London. So,
Cool.
yeah, it's
So it's a notable size, right? And because of that, large transaction volume, like you've got tens of thousands, you've got a lot of
yeah.
things you're handling there. And I assume a reasonable finance team in size?
Well, no, this is it really. So when we walked in, they had a finance team of two,
Wow.
which wasn't adequate. And as a result of that, a lot of the challenges that we faced with data continuity. So they were using a desktop package to do it. There was a desire to move to the cloud. That was one of the challenges that the new system was facing, but they just weren't getting the reporting information that they wanted. Actually, a lot of the entries weren't going into the accounting system. So they were actually maintaining two ledgers, one in Excel, which had like ancillary journals that in theory match the stats, although we've never been able to quite prove that. Um, and a number of entries that were the more day-to-day business as usual transactions, bookkeeping transactions, which were being reported in Sage. So
Okay.
it was a bit of a mishmash of Excel and the desktop application that they were using at the time. I'm not going to mention brands. And this was a lot of the goal in terms of the senior board. Like at that level, they're quite bureaucratic organizations. They have risk and advisory boards and management boards and so on and so forth. And reporting was late. As a result, there wasn't so much faith in some of the numbers. This was also during COVID time. So there was becoming pressure on budgets, particularly in not-for-profits. And many other business, not just not-for-profits, but particularly not-for-profits, potentially. And so there was a large desire for more transparency in the reports, real-time data they could rely on, and overall to make that process easier. Sorry, carry on.
I was going to say that makes a lot of sense. I guess what I've got a question out of this is that obviously you've had a referral in from a finance system. They've made the sale, to some extent, and you're being asked to solve some technical issues or technical challenges. Whenever I've dealt with a sales team, it's always been maybe not misrepresented, but maybe oversold slightly. Did you encounter any challenges where what was handed to you were like, okay, I need to just provide some clarity, some realization about what the system can or can't do and how that matches to what I guess you're expecting it. Did you encounter any of that?
Not so much, because outside of the finance package, they had a lot of the core functionality exactly. So they didn't have a lot of expectations in terms of actually improving what they had already, which was fairly functional, sort of functional. So there wasn't too many like dreams in it, right? It was a case of, we just want a package that's going to work, that delivers what we're doing at the moment, because what we've got at the moment isn't really working. Right? So, they wanted to have expenses, they wanted to have procurement and purchase ordering, and some of the driver behind this was they had an existing procurement system which was being deprecated, so that was not going to be around. So there are a number of factors pushing this, and it was culminating in, we have to do this. So I'd love to say a lot of finance projects that come to you are because they really want to do it, right? And they're like, there's a lot of enthusiasm behind it, but it was more, there was a bit of push and pull in terms of their operating system was going to be deprecated, so they didn't have a massive heap of choice, right? So and as part of that, they wanted it to be one solution rather than having a separate procurement system and a separate finance package and Excel. The big driver was, this should be one thing, right? And that was the problem that they were looking to solve. And that was something that was deliverable with a mid-market solution. So they weren't missold, I would say, in that area. The area that some solutions do tend to exaggerate, let's use the word, is around integrations. So, when you're meeting a prospect, yes, we can integrate this. And the key word in that is we can. But often there's a commercial discussion around who's doing the work for that, right? Who's actually who's actually doing the heavy lifting of creating the technology necessary to do that. Either you're going to have to go and purchase one to do that, or someone has to have a commercial reason to build it.
Yeah, that makes sense. But I guess if they're looking to do everything inside one package, that would limit some of the need of that, or were they connecting what they already had into the finance system?
No, so they were consolidating three things into one. There was a desire to integrate the membership side of the business from their CRM, but that is actually something that is still being worked on now. And the reason for that is not because of a failure to deliver on the project; it was because of their data. In terms of part of our job was to go in there, and there's no point plugging something in if the numbers aren't quite adding up. So
it causes mess everywhere, doesn't it? Like, because you connect it and it just pushes bad data from one place into another, and then you're in a worse place. But all of these projects, you break them down in stages. What is critical? What we have to do now, and then you build out. I think a lot of businesses go, we want to change everything that we currently have into one place. Yeah, technically that can be done, but for your team, for your business, the change management and the turmoil that creates is just not worth it. And so, a key part, I guess, of our job is to identify where they need to get to and then break that down in stages and help them manage that change. But something that I guess that you said is they came to you with a rather simpler request, and then you identified that they needed to do a lot more, and they engaged with you for a lot more support. So can you talk a little bit about how that journey, like how that went on to you winning a lot more work than I guess you expected?
Yeah, it's evolved, largely because it became apparent that the finance team weren't totally on board with the motive in a lot of ways, and there was a lot of resistance to change, and a lot of money was being invested in this project from a human capital perspective. Our fees, software fees, you're paying the staff to do it, and let's say there was some resistance. So basically there was an effort to deliver the project, but there were some delays within it just through
from what they needed to do from their side.
Correct. Okay. So it actually got to the stage where at an exec level they said, we have to go live. We can't not do this. We can't not follow through with this. We've invested too much in it. It has to happen. Okay. So basically, we, as an external party, went live with their system and were doing elements of their books for the first few months, just to make sure that it went live. But there are a number of stakeholders involved. Like, everyone had a new expenses system across the UK. It was a new procurement system, so people across the UK were raising purchase orders, and a number of moving parts. And the appetite to own that project internally within the finance team wasn't where it needed to be.
Fair enough. So do you? I guess I've not known your team to be set up to do bookkeeping. Are you saying that you had to kind of pivot and start doing bookkeeping? I know you've got the skill set to, because you're financially trained. So how did that conversation work? Like, did you just go, well, okay, we can do it, and then they just went, I'll take you up on that. Okay.
Essentially, because otherwise the numbers weren't going to happen. So, and the way that it coincided was with annual leave of some of the finance team anyway. So there was no one there to do it. So, and all that culminated in is essentially when they came back from annual leave, they had a system that they didn't know how to use. So
what's happened to them? Are they, because I guess, as you said, people are doing bits in the system throughout the UK. You've trained people across the UK on this. So when the finance team came back, were they coming back to a job, or did they talk themselves out of a role at the business?
Well, they eventually had to get on board. I think really they believed if they didn't contribute, it wouldn't happen. It would be binned off,
shelved.
and it took exec to basically say, no, we're going to do it sort of with or without you. So
It's a brave
you've
decision.
got a choice. And effectively they came back, and then, things were eventually resolved, and things have worked out in the end. But there was certainly an interim period where we had to put the marigolds on and do it ourselves. So
Yeah, get your hands dirty. So so they've kind of taken a step back. They've engaged you for implementing and training on the system. You have done that, or got to a stage, and then you've been waiting for data not coming to you. You're like, well, we need to do something. The execs go, we need to do something. Can you do it? You're like, yeah, we can kind of do some of the bookkeeping and get that where it needs to be. Then you're doing a handover. So at what stage did it get to where you're like, okay, well, I feel we've met 90% of what the objectives were, and they could, I guess, take that step back and go, we feel we've got success. How did that kind of middle to end journey go? I know you said you're still doing some work with them, but how did that?
Yeah, that's largely around the operational bits and pieces, to be honest.
Okay.
Just sort of monitoring and checking, because we're finally getting to the stage that the CRM data is reconciling, because there's other parts of this that you're relying on the suppliers who supply the CRM to do stuff, right?
Yeah, of course.
Like if the data's not adding up, like you've got to ask your provider. So there was elements of having to prove to them that it wasn't adding up, because they didn't believe us at the beginning.
Of course,
so you have to go through that rigmarole of proving you're right. So outside of that, though, in terms of the core deliverables of the project, we were able to deliver we were able to replace the deprecated system successfully. We were able to introduce the new expenses system, because those were separate systems before. And we were able to consolidate that fully with the finances and remove all the external Excel files and actually consolidate all of the numbers that were being held in different spreadsheets. So really the light bulb moment from the client's perspective is we're doing a board meeting where they're logged into a laptop in the boardroom and there's numbers on the screen, and we're sitting there saying, here are your numbers in a system, and this is how you can access them in real time, and this is how you can see the information that you need. Now, primarily you do that in an exec meeting, and then you have separate meetings with each board member to actually provide them with the
information they need,
detailed approach to do it themselves, right? So that was I think the light bulb moment for the business, in terms of the main objective that we've achieved here in terms of transparency into our budgets, transparency into what we're spending and what we're approving from a cost perspective, and the ability to see the reports in real time. That's been achieved, and these are numbers that we have confidence in. So that was the big tick.
And so I guess the other thing that I'm intrigued about, because of the evolving nature of this product, is how did you handle the conversations regarding fees? Because scope creep is always a massive problem in what we do. And if they're going, okay, we've delivered that and the data's not quite there, you have to keep going back and having those challenging conversations. And that could just add time on anyway, those going back and forth. So is it that each time you set a very defined scope, and then when that wasn't met, you could go back and say, can you, do you need us to assist?
What we actually did is we did it as part of a secondment agreement. So basically we had a fixed retainer per month for a number of days per month. And if there was creep on that, we just managed it. But as with some of these things, you're needed more some weeks and less some. So we just retained a decent average. And that was for sort of our fees, but then there were some elements that we were doing as subcontracted from the provider, which were done on a timesheet basis, which is time and materials. So you just put the time into the timesheet, and that got handled different ways. So there was almost two parts to the project, which we had to split across the business. So I was actually doing the implementation and working under the umbrella as a subcontractor of the software provider, whereas other members of my staff were under the secondment agreement. So we had to completely segregate it to make sure that we were fulfilling the contracts on both sides. So we were,
it's challenging from an internal management perspective. I think that's maybe where from my own perspective, I'd be the same as you. I look at that as a big success because we've had to do something very different. We've had to pivot. We've been stretched beyond, I guess, what we'd normally be expected to do, a service we don't actually offer, such as bookkeeping. And we've taken where they were, which was a chaos of systems and data by the sounds of it, and consolidated that all down, got consistency, and done that in a time frame that they're generally happy with. Probably not what they initially expected because the data wasn't there and there's a lot more work involved. But it got to a point. So, if there was one takeaway from this that you think you learnt from on a digital transformation basis that you could then take forward, what would you potentially say that was? What was the big kind of light bulb factor for you?
I mean, generally, I think we got out of, I don't look back and think that we didn't handle certain things in the wrong way. But a lot of the challenges were human rather than technical, to be honest. And, we're an external party, so we're not getting so involved in that in terms of, how they conduct their internal human resources, right? So, but from our side, it's just about constant communication with the senior stakeholders and making sure they're aware of what's going on, which isn't the most uplifting part of a project, covering your back, but
No,
you have to make sure that the communication is clear and that the understanding is clear and it's well project managed. That's, I guess, the one thing that I sort of did take from it is you have to manage these projects properly and have proper process and not be lazy on them, because it's all well and good until it goes wrong.
Proactive project management is an absolute must in digital transformation, and something that I think that if you're an accountancy firm and you're thinking, oh, I should do digital transformation, you think it's very similar to doing accounts or tax. It's not. The skill set of actually just getting these over the line and the way you communicate through that is completely different, and probably the systems that you use to manage that is completely different to other areas of the business. So if you are thinking about doing it, you have to think about actually restructuring, rethinking, and reskilling your team. And I think that's a brilliant place to wrap up. Thank you, Jamie, for coming on, talking about the project that sounds like quite a meaty one, to be honest, and probably ended up eating your life for a while. But the main point on any of these is that success is always specific to the client and what you're trying to achieve. So hopefully this episode has brought any of you that are listening and watching valuable insights that you can take forward. Please do check out the show notes for links to Digital Disruptors, to 4.0, and our wonderful sponsor, Approval Max, plus anything and anyone that we've referenced from a software perspective through the show. If you want to ensure you catch future episodes, please do subscribe to our YouTube channel and look out for the release every Thursday morning. Look forward to speaking to you again next week.